All right, and we are live. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to this week's edition of Sunday Funday Controls Chat. Today, we're going to be talking about a case study on the way that industrial automation can succumb and has succumbed to various forms of corruption. And we're going to be talking about two places I personally worked at. Um, One that I'm actually bringing up for the first time here, story I have for Kodak that I'll actually be releasing a article as of next week. So stay tuned for the whole overview on that. Today I'm just going to be providing a brief summary on it, and I'm going to be covering some additional footnotes about the way in which the whole life cycle scheme operated and how, again, they're not really the only ones doing so. Pretty much every lithium battery recycler in the entire planet is exercising the same sort of shady practices, and we'll take it from there. So without further ado, let's get into today's agenda. Just as a disclaimer, as usual, I'm not sponsored or influenced in any way. Nobody has paid me directly or indirectly, and all the content and opinions you're about to see are my own. You can feel free to use this material as you wish. I don't care about DMCA or copyright striking anybody, so I'll post the slide deck at the end of today's live as well. So stay tuned for that. I'll upload it to LinkedIn and then share a post and copy it on the YouTube comments section. And I usually also repost the slide deck the following week just in case you happen to miss today's live stream. So, all right. So on today's agenda, we're going to talk about the conflation of black mass weight to the raw material shredded weight, as well as the lack of quality control for the black mass that was collected. We're going to talk about some of the series of steps really that were intentionally, I argue, intentionally missed, ultimately leading to practices of cronyism, leading to practices of shilling one particular vendor's technology, and a hard refusal of considering any other types of services or products or technologies, and how industry associations uh, turned a blind eye not only to this case, but more broadly speaking, while this occurred at Kodak. This is not an isolated incident. There's a series of steps that you have to go through in order to make some of these large scale business decisions, right? And that's really the big takeaway that I want people to get out of this, which is that it takes two to tango. And so this is not a, single actor. It always takes a series of people to execute these kinds of whether it be small or large forms of corruption. So, um, following up on that, we're gonna show, how this is not really a case of bad digital strategy or a lack of digital strategy. This is really a much bigger issue, where open source is completely disavowed, and not only that, but all of the oversight and organizations that one might expect would be present to help protect and serve against such bad actors are really actually in on it. And as long as their members pay dues, then it's all good. We're going to talk about some calls to action and some other housekeeping, and we'll get right into Q&A from there. So without further ado, let's go ahead and talk about lifecycle. So again, just as a recap, ultimately what's happening at Lifecycle, not just Lifecycle, but really every lithium battery recycler, is they are conflating the total raw material shredded weight, which consists of plastics and aluminum, which actually house the batteries, to the black mass that weight that they are claiming is being produced. Where this gets really nefarious is there's no independent weight certification to verify that the black mass weight is what it is and that it's not being lined with raw material. Similarly, you can think of this when you go to a grocery store, and there's actually municipal and state agencies responsible for verifying that the scale doing the measuring is calibrated properly so that it's not reading some value of higher or lower than what is actually present, and that those inspectors are independent of the business and they release their findings publicly. This does not exist, and you would imagine a business whose sole product is the weight of something they produce, as well as the quality of that product, and we'll get into that a little bit. You would imagine that number one, be it industry associations or the weights and scales authorities would be jumping in on this, and they're not. I'm not saying it has to be done by a government authority, but it's very clear that it's not being done. When we talk about other raw materials, raw material goods that are sold in bulk in manufacturing, we have a series of steps there to protect the consumer and make the public aware of the quality and contents of the raw materials being sold. So we have things like certificates of analysis for bulk chemistry that will show the composition of the material used, that material being sold, so that inevitably when it's used in some sort of manufacturing process, you're able to make some determinations on whether your yield was off or your yield was potentially increased based off of the quality of the product and so forth. There is no equivalent for black mass in lithium battery recycling. And the fact that black mass still today is being allowed to be sold without any sort of independent auditing is just criminal. I mean, imagine going to a grocery store and you're trying to buy a pound of steak, and the grocery store is selling you, a quarter of a pound, but still charging you for the same rate. You wouldn't take that. So why should we for something that is being touted as the next green savior of mankind? It's just ridiculous. And so that's number one. We have the conflation of the weights and no inspection and auditing of the weights. Number two is the quality control for the black mass produced. Just because you made black mass doesn't mean it's usable. You have to verify that it was catalyzed correctly and that the electrical properties of that black mass are fit for use in batteries, because ultimately that's what it's going to be reused for. So is it even fit for use regardless of the battery it's going to be used for, be it a consumer battery or an industrial grade battery like the one for trucks and cars? There is no quality control present at Lifecycle, and only recently did they start doing it in the last month or two, and it's manual after the fact. And what's to say for what's going to happen for all the other black mass that has been sold? Ultimately it's the customer that's going to be left literally holding the bag. They're going to have to figure out what to do with less than stellar black mass, things like excess moisture content, not enough concentration of the precious metals required to properly catalyze it for repurposing into a battery. And again, when we talk about weight and potency of the and quality of the black mass, we have to talk about things like what's an acceptable reading for how much raw material scrap, aluminum and plastic, can you have present in your black mass before you can sell it, before you're allowed to. Just like we have contamination guidelines and standards for water, for really any, raw chemistry, insert name here, in units of parts per million and other acceptable levels of contamination. We don't have any of that. for black mass. And yet it's, again, not just Lifecycle that's being allowed to sell it, but countless other battery recyclers are allowed to still make money on it. And there's no consequences for inevitably when they sell junk product. And ultimately, that junk is going to go into making the batteries that we, the public, are going to be relying on. You know, these are going to be making the next generation of batteries used for cars and trucks. And now there's a lot of talk for hybrid trains with those junk black mass potentially going to trains as well. I mean, this, you can see the far-reaching implications this has. And nobody's really doing anything to stop it or, you know, audit. All right. Moving on, I found this really interesting ad as I was scrolling through my YouTube list. And I think this ultimately paints the perfect picture for what I call the greenwashing gold rush today. Which is essentially, it is truly, as Elon Musk is stating here, lithium refining, which includes recycling, is quite literally like printing money right now. There is no supervision at all on the quality of the black mass being produced, the weights, the weight of the black mass itself, and the verification that the plastics and aluminum raw material scrap have been removed from the black mass are being sold. So I've seen these ads plastered everywhere. Elon Musk is a very well-known grifter in many cases and highly idolized for, frankly, the work that he himself has not done. But I just wanted to leave this up here as an example for the fact that, you know, many people are already onto the grift, and they know because there's really no supervision or oversight for any of it. You know, get your greenwashed money as soon and fast as you can, and let everybody else hold the bag. So we'll get into Kodak next. And it's frankly a story that has taken me quite a while to write up to this point. And if I could summarize it, it's essentially a failure on many parts. It's a failure on industry associations. It's a failure on internal leadership at Kodak. It's a failure on law enforcement bodies to remove these sets of leaders from their positions of power, despite quite literally being caught with their pants down. So we'll talk about that next year. And essentially what's going on at Kodak is there's a major conflict of interest with Jim Continenza, who is the current CEO and chairman of the board. He joined many years back as part of Kodak's board, and only recently, in about 2019, was granted the title of CEO and chairman of the board. In the time that Continenza has been in power at Kodak, he has actually served as the CEO consecutively of two companies, Vivial and Kodak. The interesting thing is, while it's not technically illegal to serve as the CEO of multiple companies consecutively, what is a major red flag and highly unethical is when you use your CEO position of one of these other companies to exclusively hire them to do work for your other company that you also serve as the CEO of. And this is exactly what Continenza has done. He hired many staff from Vivial to hold high-ranking positions within Kodak. One in particular is a gentleman by the name of Jim Barnes, who was granted the title of Chief Implementation Officer. This hiring, by the way, from Vivial, coming completely out of left corner. Nobody else really knew about it. And the story of Vivial is they are essentially a small business SEO marketing company. And what they were hired to do at Kodak is actually a total rip and replace of all of their legacy controls infrastructure and data computer systems and implement new controls, infrastructure, and complex data systems. Anybody that is a rational thinking human being would immediately be jumping at their seat right now with red flags, alarm blaring. You know, what business does a small SEO marketing, sales and marketing company, what sort of expertise do they have in managing highly complex computer systems for process manufacturers like Kodak? And especially a company like Kodak that has a highly complex suite of products behind it. It just doesn't make any sense. And as you'll see in the article that I've got coming up next week, it's pretty apparent why that is. When there's a lot of money to be made in the grift of now is life sciences as the new sort of market vertical in manufacturing to make a lot of money quickly. That's essentially why Vivio was brought on board. And so what they were proposing, Jim Barnes and other Vivio staff were proposing, is ultimately a solution stack across all of Kodak from L2 and above, exclusively with SAP technology. And if you've ever used all of the suite of SAP products, and I'm ashamed that to say that I unfortunately have, you will know very quickly that there's just no way that SAP can meet all of your manufacturer's needs, truly. Yet that was essentially what's being proposed still to this day at Kodak, and it's quite shameful because there's many people involved in this whole conundrum. You know, these kinds of large purchases don't just simply happen. There's industry associations, there's channel providers, there's OEMs who all essentially have to do some level of discovery and make a choice on whether they want to sell their products and services to this customer or not. And as you'll see in the article, there's just no way they could have possibly missed the fact that this was all a giant sham. It was doomed to fail from the start. Yet they continue to sell those products because, you know, your money is as good as anybody else, and damned if I do any due diligence and care about the reputation of the company and the types of customers I deal with. So it's pretty shameful. We'll get into our next section here. That ultimately all of these stories are intertwined, and more importantly, it's not just a tale of bad digital strategy or lack thereof. And what I argue is that really, when we talk about digital strategy, I take it as a giant cope to ultimately detract from the true matter at hand, which is the disavowal of open source and the intentional shilling and lobbying for closed source proprietary technology in an environment that really should not have any tolerance for such technology. We are ultimately talking about physical environments that are endangering people's lives, and inevitably when something does go wrong, everybody should have the ability to verify independently what occurred, what faults happened, and you simply cannot do that with proprietary closed source technology. I could understand if it was something like a video game, and even there's many conversations to be had, but we are talking about physical infrastructure that is providing telecommunications, electrical power, water, gas. There's just no place for any sort of proprietary closed source technology at the hardware or software level, period. It just should not even be a discussion. We're talking about the safety and well-being of people, and the only way that anybody could truly audit independently without any sort of censorship, inevitably when a incident does occur, is through the use of open source. And so these tales of and stories I hear online from many social media influencers, when they talk about digital transformation this and digital transformation that, all of their narratives, quite frankly, completely neglect the beginning of how this technology even got there in the first place. They just sort of take it as a given that, well, we have SAP, or we have some IBM solution, or we have some Oracle solution. And so we should just continue going down that rabbit hole. And oh, by the way, look, now we have a story from Nike and how they lost $300 million because they continued down the SAP rabbit hole. Why not actually talk about how the SAP solution got there to begin with, and what sort of cultural and technological environment was lobbying to continue down that stack? We never hear any of these stories, and fundamentally they are what is more important than, what crappy module they use from SAP or Oracle. That's completely beside the point. It seems like there is a very vested interest to continue, even from these channels that are purporting to, have the best interest of manufacturers, the best interest of saving and creating middle class jobs, of, making manufacturing great again. None of them are talking about what's really important, which is the need to proliferate and fund open source, and why all of these VC firms and big tech giants continue to lobby and shill their inferior products and services. It just seems like they continue taking for granted that, oh, well, they had this technology, and so, technology does as technology does, and we just try to implement this module, and it just didn't work out. But why? Why specifically, outside of the completely inferior technology? Why is it that it failed? We never talk about the individuals behind the scenes that are lobbying hard to make these softwares mainstream within their organizations, and the kickbacks they ultimately get, because you follow the money and you'll have your answer. But none of these channels are willing to do so, and I'll be damned if they continue to do such a disservice to the profession. And I'll take the first stab at it, and I'll say, and I'll give very specific cases and examples. That's what I did with my previous expose. That's what I'm aiming to do with this upcoming expose on Kodak. And it's just ridiculous. Ultimately, at the end of the day, the answer is very clear on why they're not doing it, right? The answer is because open source ultimately hurts the bottom line, and it saves customers tons of money and allows complete independence and control over their controls infrastructure, their software systems, and they don't have to rely on, insert giant company name here. And that's a major threat to these businesses. But it is the way forward, and we just cannot sit back and allow proprietary closed source to be the mainstream within industrial automation. Again, we're talking about people's lives at risk here. It would be a different story if it was, a video game app, but it's not. So, all right, we're about to wrap it up here, but just some calls to action and some housekeeping. Creating a lot of this content does take quite a bit of time, and I'm honestly happy to do it, but just wanted to let you know the things I have promised in the past, I'm definitely still working on. And I think ultimately, if you really want to be of help, I think the best thing you could do is actually mimic some of this, but for the local community that you work in. So for example, the watchdog platform that I'm looking to build for New York State, do that for your local community. And frankly, it's quite easy. Look up your state agencies and what programs they have to fund manufacturing innovation, and you essentially just find the names of the individuals, you find what backgrounds they have and where they previously worked, and simply begin to connect the dots, and very quickly you will see a clear picture develop that, this VC fund manager actually also serves on the board of, this OEM